Hello! We are here to honor Leonard on his 50th anniversary of his spiritual birthday.
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday! And I am going to interview Leonard's sister, Doris,
I'm very excited to be here.
and ask some questions to give us a little better feel for Leonard as he matured as a Christian.
I didn't know I was going to take a test, but we'll try to do my very best answers. Let's see if I get them right. Leonard can tell you if they're wrong.
So, Doris, how long have you known Leonard?
I think I've known him all my life, but I don't remember all of our lives together.
Since you were this big?
Yeah, even
Okay.
smaller.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Give me one characteristic that overall describes Leonard's relationship with you.
As a sibling, patience, and probably even in the questions that I ask, patience.
Okay. Growing up, it's natural for kids to have a sibling rivalry and so forth. Any stories in particular that stand out in your relationship with Leonard?
Well, my brother didn't seem to be a regular sibling because I seemed to pester him a lot, and he wanted to read a lot of the time, everything from huge books to comic books, and just kind of dip his saltine crackers in the milk, drink the milk and eat, and just have alone time. Or he would go with a few of his other friends that he was growing in the faith with or witnessing to. And I wanted to be a part of that because he was my only brother. We didn't have another sister. We didn't have another brother. And I was so much younger. He just wanted to have that alone time. And I would pester. But he wouldn't get angry really at it. So I do remember, though, one time that you actually did something youthful where you kind of let caution be blown to the wind. And I was coming home from an elementary concert with friends of mine, and Leonard, you were in a car of your friends, and the car pulled up to us, and I didn't know whose it was. And I'm this little kid walking home with my friends. We lived about 2 blocks from the school. And the guy leans out and goes, "Hey, do you want to ride?" And I'm heading for the snowbank and going away with my friends going, "No," and thinking these guys are creepers or something like that. And my brother leans out the back of the car and goes, "Hey, Doris." So a little teasing once in a while, but really you were a godly example of patience.
Okay. How about as far as growing up as a kid? Leonard you described him in the past as being one of your early disciplers. Any stories of discipleship as a child?
Oh, one that I first really remember was, I always think of it as the prodigal son because it was the prodigal son tract. And I remember, Leonard, after I got saved, you just believed in telling people about Jesus and bringing them to the Lord. So you sent me with, the tracts were this big. They were real thin paper, maybe a few pages, but they were huge, and they were made for kids. And they were prodigal son, and you said, "Here, go pass these out to your friends at school." And so during recess, I ran around and I passed these prodigal son tracts. And I think only one got ripped up. Otherwise, the other ones got taken or brought home or read. And that was the start of my brother helping me evangelize.
Okay. And I think I've heard of stories of him preaching in school.
He remembers it differently than I do.
Okay.
My brother, I think the story goes, he stood on the lunch tables and preached. And he said that, right, he said that it was somebody else, but whoever was preaching said the guys in the high school should be treating their girlfriends like sisters, and they didn't like it. But he stayed with it. And I remember you were part of something in high school, too, where you were one of the journalists, or maybe, you wrote the articles with people, and it was called The Bullsheet, and you wrote perspectives on it. I remember that. Maybe you could fill in the audience a little bit on more what happened with that, but I remember you were part of that as a Christian.
And social consciousness, political awareness. I understand that he had some impact in your life in regards to that, as far as.
Oh yeah, for you mean like politicians or political? There was a couple of times I remember. Once I was in 10th grade speech class, I think it was, and we had to be giving a persuasive speech. And I remember either you brought up the idea or I brought up the idea, Leonard, and it was about supporting saying one nation under God in the Pledge of Allegiance. And believe it or not, people, way back even when Leonard and I were in school, that there was a talk of taking one nation under God out of there. And I remember you working with me, Leonard, to be able to do that speaking. And by the way, in that speech class, I got an A+. Just letting you know.
Okay.
Oh, also, I remember Ronald Reagan was running. I wasn't old enough to vote, but I was a senior or something like that. And so I said, Leonard, I need some help. Give me some information on Ronald Reagan. And do you have anything I can use for my speech in class? I think it was in civics or something. And you said, yeah, I'll send you a poster. You sent me a really good poster of Ronald Reagan and always was there for information. As any of you know, ask Leonard and he can give you answers or knowledge information about anything and anyone. And so I was really happy. I presented and I graduated, went off to go down to college by the U of M. And Leonard and I were walking from one place to the other in Dinkytown shortly after that. And someone wanted people to sign. I think it was for the libertarians or that wanted to run a candidate and they wanted you to sign. And I thought, I don't think I want to sign that. I want to vote for Ronald Reagan if I could, and I couldn't vote yet, but I don't think I want to sign that. And I remember that I said, no, thank you. I wanted to be polite, the Minnesota nice. And I went to walk away, and Leonard said to them, she voted for Ronald Reagan anyway, just to see the reaction. And I said, and the person turned and said, do you think he should be the only one running for office? And I'm thinking, wow, I didn't even get to vote yet. And Leonard always kind of liked to get people to dialogue and think.
Sure. I remember in college, I'd say probably 2-to-1 people in the church that we attended were probably Republican. But Leonard encouraged people to get out to the DFL caucuses to have an impact on the candidates that they put forth. So I remember that, just even though, it probably wasn't going to be a voting DFL, but he thought it would be a good idea to get out and promote candidates for that. So it was interesting in my formative years when I first became a Christian as well on the University of Minnesota campus.
Well, and that reminds me about that time, I think, was when Leonard was already down by the University of Minnesota and somehow would get connection with cults.
Yeah. And
so I remember one time there's a story told that they had, I don't know if it was the Moonies or somebody that had a RV or something, and Leonard had started dialoguing with them, and he talked so much in detail about what they believed that they invited him into the RV and they wanted to talk more with him because they didn't know how this guy knew so much about what they believed. And then we were with the international students and Joy. I don't know if you were there, Joy and Matthew, but I was down in Madison, and this is just not so long ago, a few years ago. And I think the young man was from was he from Japan? Leonard started to dialogue with him and talk in detail about his country and the beliefs and that, the political side and everything. I don't know. There was stuff that they began to talk about. And the young man looked at him and said, how do you know so much about my country? And Leonard said, well, I know a lot of details that probably aren't that important also I have. And the young man was just so, I think, taken in that somebody cared about his country that was not from his country as a native.
Leonard had a big impact as well in your choice of college when you went off to college.
Yes, although I didn't know that. But he talked to Mom, and he said, I want to see her go to the Gopi Forest down in Texas, or I wanted her to be at the University of Minnesota in Chi Alpha and to be part of Christians in Action. And
even more specifically on where you should stay.
yes, he believed I should live in a women's household because of the impact of living daily godly lives. And so all he showed me was the great side of come on down during my senior year. And I think there was your friends and became my friends. Tom was there, Tom Lavelle, I think, and I think I have his name right there, and Craig Kruger, and there were a couple other guys and that, and we went to the Turkey movies, and Ronald Reagan and Shirley Temple were in one of them, and then Plan 9 from Outer Space was playing, and all I thought, wearing my leather jacket with my long red hair, I was cool hanging out with these college guys, and I remember going over to visit where Tom was living, and he said, when I saw the kitty, I was going to pet it, and he said, don't touch that cat. And I said, why? And he said, oh, it's been put in the communal cat, and it had been put into a bag and swung around a lot or something, he said. And I just thought, and I was pretty young, naive, and I just had not a clue is like college life, okay. But then I also ended up getting to connect with the university students that really loved God, all of those guys, and then the gals that loved God, and ended up moving into the Christian women's household, changed my life for the better.
Had a little taste of men's households on different occasions, but my first major taste of men's household after I'd been a Christian 2 or 3 years at the University of Minnesota, the summer, I had to move out of the dorms. I wanted to stay in Minneapolis to work jobs and stuff in the area. And I stayed at the men's household, the Haven, where we have 20-plus men
right.
living in a household. And, the challenges of keeping it clean and keeping everyone accountable to each other.
Wow.
Definitely a challenge. And Leonard was one of the leaders in that household. And that was an interesting season in my life. And then later I went did a smaller men's household as well. With several other men as well from the church, and it was quite an adventure, but it was interesting.
Oh, and talking about going down to the university, I needed to find a job, maybe a couple of jobs or that. And I remember not only the women having an impact on my life of finding a job down there, but my brother helping me in the sense of he put me in his car and we drove the street, probably 4th Street or whatever of Dinkytown, one-way direction there. And as Leonard would point out, he knew the people, or he knew the buildings and the people. And he would say, like, okay, now, there's McDonald's, yeah, and Bridgman's and that I ended up working at eventually. But he'll say, oh, and there's the steakhouse. There are some people who are Greek that own the steakhouse. And the Greeks will work you hard, but they will treat you well. And then he said, and he pointed at another place, and he said, and you're not going to apply there because the mafia is there. And I just kind of went, wow. And so off we went down the street for him giving me advice on how to get a job.
Yeah. How has he challenged you in your faith?
Okay. Always. I said giving out the prodigal son, speaking up in class for God's what God stood for and who he was in my life. And then I think we were college age at this time. I was, or that. Maybe he was done. And I remember him telling me one time, and now as a Christian, you have no rights. And I looked at him, and I had felt insulted, and what am I trying to say?
Got your dander up.
Yeah, I got my gander up. I've
never seen you with your dander up, honey. Never.
Yeah. Okay. This isn't about you. Anyway, so we, he said that, and I just went into shock for a moment, and I said, well, yes, I still have rights. And I was thinking, I'm an American. I have rights. And what Leonard was talking about was giving up total self to God in the sense of I didn't have the rights anymore, but he had all the say in my life. And I had to release everything to him and become total servant. Even though I was a follower of Christ, my heart was after Christ. it was really about giving up self, and it made an impact on my life.
One of the you already mentioned the thing where the cults were, Leonard would be able to talk with people from different worldviews and stuff like that. Especially like the cult people and stuff like that.
Yeah.
No specifics about what they believed and stuff like that. One of the challenges I saw with Leonard in college and stuff like that was just his heart for Christian apologetics, to be able to defend your faith. To know what you believe and what other people believe and what the distinctions are between them and stuff like that. He also challenged me. He would preach at noon on the mall in the spring and fall, and when it was fairly nice outside, to draw crowds and have an impact on campus. And several times he called me up to share my testimony.
Oh yes, I remember the first time. Leroy, come up and share your testimony. It was like right then. It wasn't, I'll warn you too much ahead of time.
Yeah, and then later when we took our families to Peru, we're also giving our testimonies there in Peru and stuff like that, going with Leonard and stuff like that. So it was challenging.
It was good. Yes, I always could rely on Leonard to say, let's just go do this. That was kind of like our mother, where she would just say she did not have a fear to go and talk to people about the Lord and how he could change their lives if they followed him. So that reminds me, too, the witnessing on the campus. I remember I first went. I had a fire in my heart for Jesus, but I also had a fire in my red hair, and I think Leonard had either seen me or I talked to him about it. There was this guy, he was hot under the collar, and he was defending what he believed, and I began to say something about, I don't know if we were talking about wars happening, and I said, something about, there's a war in your heart, or there's war, do you want war to happen or something? And I started to get worked up and yelling back at him. And Leonard had taught me then, it's not about yelling back and forth at people, but you really want to listen, and then they will give you an opportunity usually to give your perspective and dialogue with you. So I learned more from his dialoguing and to teach me how to dialogue. And patience again, yeah.
Did Leonard have any impact on your decision to marry?
Yes, he did. Thank you, Mr. Interview Person, who is my husband. And that, if you didn't guess already, Leroy, in the sense of this way, he spoke well of you. And that made a lot of impact in my heart. And he also spoke well of me. And Leonard, when you speak words of truth into people, and your writings that you write in your cards, and that are such a great encouragement and building up of people. And so when you said, that you appreciated that I waited, I didn't get married right out of high school, and I had made a wise choice when I made my choice with Leroy, and he saw the godly man that Leroy was, it just meant the world to me. So it's a good thing he spoke well of you.
Good deal.